There's no other college that could have done this.
Penn State was sort of ahead of the game with the Earth System Science Center.
And it was the future being built.
We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time.
And we're not sure what it's going to look like, but it's going to be great.
It started as the Earth System Science Center, but then in 1999, the university asked the college to change the name to the Environment Institute because they were making environment institutes around campus. Soon thereafter, there was another request to rename it because then once there was multiple environment institutes around campus, then there was confusion. And that's when I came up with the name of the Earth and Environmental Systems Institute, at least partly because the acronym is easy. And I really wanted it to be an institute where scientists, students, faculty could do the best research and education imaginable in the easiest way possible.
The idea was to bring together researchers and look at sort of the Earth from an interdisciplinary perspective.
Up until that point, interdisciplinary work wasn't that successful in universities.
People were, at that time, 15 or 20 years ago, very, siloed into their individual subdisciplines, trying to work on topics of the early Earth.
So I think Penn State has been brilliant. I think the center, the institute, have been brilliant at getting out of silos. And I think they figured it out here better than most places.
And that was the real goal. The real goal was to get cross-communication, get more work going.
What we're really interested in is the intersection between the physical and biological Earth systems.
One of the things that typifies a person who is a fellow in the Earth and Environmental Institute, as it became, is that we're all interdisciplinarians.
So we want to understand the rocks, the air, the ocean, and how they all interact in a way that we understand it as a system.
Charles Hostler, former dean of the College of Earth and Mineral Sciences, had the idea to create a new section within the college that would focus on Earth system science. Rather than focusing on individual disciplines, Hostler wanted to target the Earth systems as a whole, a science needed for understanding the pressing problems of global environmental change. Hostler found the funding for this idea by restructuring the college. An opportunity was born.
And that provided a few $1 million that were available for me to go to the administration of the university in Old Main and say, I'll match it if you give me an equivalent amount of money, and we'll start this new section that deals with the entire system in all its complexity. We had lots of pieces, people with very comprehensive knowledge of the Earth system, parts of the Earth system, but they weren't talking to each other. In the universe of people working in the earth sciences in general, there were gaps. No one was worrying about whether we were attacking the whole picture. I felt we could make a unique contribution because we had many of the parts. In the meantime, they asked me to take over the vice president for research job and dean of the graduate school. I had to help name a dean, and we made John Dutton dean, and it was up to John Dutton to execute on my plan. I had a NASA research grant in the 80s when I was head of the Department of Meteorology. I got a call one day in my office from a gentleman named Bert Edelson, who was the new associate administrator of NASA. And he said they were putting together a committee to give NASA advice on the Earth and Space Science Research Program. Would I be willing to be a member? And I told Dr. Edelson,
I remember NASA had been good to me, sure. It turned out this was the Space and Earth Science Advisory Committee, CSAC. It ended up involving about 35 people, space scientists, earth scientists, people in various ways involved in space activities. And NASA had realized that it had some problems with the space and earth sciences and was asking our advice what to do. Another subcommittee was formed, and that committee helped NASA put together a request for proposals from the NASA laboratories and universities for interdisciplinary efforts that would support Earth system science. Having been a member of the committee, being involved with Earth system science at Penn State, the logical thing to do was propose an interdisciplinary project for Penn State. The late Greg Knight, who was a faculty member in geography, and I wrote the proposal.
Greg Knight, I think, was a good thinker in that he saw somewhat what I saw, that it wasn't being put together.
The proposal was approved, and we sent it off to NASA, and it was funded.
I lost track of the process because not only was I vice president for research and dean of the graduate school, but I was provost and executive vice president of the university.
Since we were responding to the Earth System Science Committee, ESSC, the logical thing to name it was the Earth System Science Center, ESSC. We started looking for a director. We had the good fortune that there was a geoscientist from Harvard visiting. His name was Heinrich Dick Holland. Dick Holland was actually the first director of ESSC. He suggested there was a young man in Miami who might be a very good choice for director. And of course, he was mentioning Eric Barron.
I was a geology undergrad mate. I decided the frontier was oceanography, so I went to oceanography. Plate tectonics was a big thing. Everybody was working on oceans and reconstructing them, and I decided I didn't have any room there to do anything innovative, and I had to do the next thing. What was that? So I thought, climate. I was going to study how plate tectonics influence climate. So I set about having a committee for my PhD, and the member of my committee who was in atmospheric science called me into his office, and he said, National Center for Atmospheric Research has 6 fellowships for the summer to use the new Cray supercomputer, the first supercomputer on the public side of the fence. There was one in defense, one in NSA, and this was serial number 3, and it was going to the atmospheric sciences community. 6 people were going to get this fellowship, and you'd spend half the day working on a science problem, and you work half the day trying to learn how to program on this machine. So he told me to apply. I walked away and I rolled my eyeballs like, why? I don't have time to apply for this fellowship. It doesn't make any sense to me. There's 6 of them. There are all these atmospheric scientists that can use this machine. They're not going to pick this crazy geologist. But he was on my committee. So of course I'm going to apply. So I apply and I get a call that I have one of these fellowships. I go to the National Center for Atmospheric Research for the summer, and the group I'm with, they're working on simulating thunderstorms or how fast can the eye wall of a hurricane spin. And I'm working on this simple problem of what they called snowball Earth back in that time. And so I finally went up to the head of the program and said, you know, all these people working on these incredible things, how did I get this fellowship? And she said, well, Seymour Cray, who built the machine, gave us the 6 fellowships. He said, on the condition that you get one oddball. And I was the oddball. The interesting thing was, I started to show people in the climate modeling group my maps of what the Earth looked like 100 million years ago, and what I wanted to do, and whether I could use these advanced weather models, climate models, to study the path. So they invited me back the next summer, and then the next summer, they gave me a postdoc, gave me a permanent scientist position, and promoted me to scientist 2. at which point I realized that I couldn't write a proposal because I was in a national lab, couldn't have students, so I needed to go off into a university environment. And I happened to take a short course as a student in the past with a fellow named Heinrich Holland, who was a Harvard professor who came to Penn State to help start the Earth System Science Center. Well, I saw the advertisement, director of the Earth System Science Center. And I said, I'm 5 years out of my PhD, I can't be the director of anything, but this is really exciting. I'm impressed. I have to follow what these folks are doing. But I didn't apply. And Dick Holland called me up on the phone and said, Eric, would you come give a talk at Penn State? I said, oh, absolutely, I'd love to give a talk at Penn State. He said, to tell you the truth, we're going to look at you as this potential director of the Earth System Science Center. And I went, oh.
So we interviewed Eric. Eric and Molly and the kids came to visit, and we appointed Eric Barron, as director of Earth System Science.
And I got here, so it must be kind of a habit, and I was surprised. And I asked them, why did you take a chance, a risk on a young person? And they said, well, we had people that had considerable stature in a field that was part of the Earth system, but we knew at least you could communicate, and that we decided maybe it was more important to be able to communicate with the different people that you were trying to bring together than take a chance on someone who was deeply buried in a particular discipline. So in many ways, being an oddball and getting a fellowship that I didn't deserve put me in a position where I was a good fit for the vision for the Earth System Science Center.
Eric turned out to be a very active director. It was underway. It was successful. Eric was doing a good job managing it. And quite frankly, from that point on, I didn't pay much attention to it. Don't mess with something that's successful.
My thought was that instead of going after specific fields, that what I wanted was the best hotshots you could possibly imagine. And that ended up adding two of the faculty members here, Richard Alley and Jim Casting, both of whom have been elected to the National Academy of Sciences. And they were frontier people.
The team that he built was to try to get the people that could do his vision. And he needed in these areas, but he needed good people who were going to make a difference.
It was that opportunity to work in this space, but just to focus on doing the best science that we could that brought such great people to Penn State.
The Cray computer was a revolutionary tool for the Earth System Science Center's research. Computationally savvy researchers and computing specialists were an integral part of the research team. They trained graduate students, postdoctoral scholars, and faculty on the Cray, accelerating research on Earth system science.
Cray computers were the forefront of supercomputers.
It allowed us to do an enormous number of simulations and a great variety of simulations that helped put Penn State on the map in terms of paleoclimate.
One of Eric Barron's goals was to make these climate models easy enough to use so grad students could start using them right away in their studies.
In order to do the kinds of things we needed to do to be part of the NASA project as well as the climate modeling that EMS wanted to get involved with, we needed computing capability. And back at that juncture of time, Cray supercomputers were basically the only devices, except maybe some computers built in Japan. And if we wanted to be in that game, we needed to have that kind of a device.
We ended up with a small Cray computer in the Dyke building. And when the new Earth and Engineering Science building was built, we created offices for ESSC in that building. And the top floor, our side of the top floor, had a much larger Cray computer.
These models are really valuable to explore different hypotheses and theories about past climate change.
It wasn't just having a Cray computer at Penn State, it was having a Cray computer in the College of Earth and Mineral Sciences. What more could you ask for?
The center attracted brilliant scientists interested in interdisciplinary research. 6 members of the ESSC faculty, now known as the Earth and Environmental Systems Institute, or EESI, have been elected to membership in the National Academy of Sciences in the fields of geology, atmospheric science, and geography, which is extraordinary given the small number of EESI faculty. The National Academy of Sciences is the most prestigious scientific society in the United States.
I'm interested in the big ice sheets, and we sort of kind of do 3 big questions with big ice sheets. What is the climate history in an ice core? The second big one is that there's these vast reservoirs of ice that is not water in the ocean. Will some of it get in the ocean and raise sea level a lot in a hurry? How do glaciers make these beautiful landscapes? How did we get Yosemite Valley? And how did we get the cornfields of Iowa and Illinois from the glaciers? And so we try to work on all of those.
I thought it was a very exciting opportunity to be part of this new interdisciplinary group. I got great admiration for Eric. I knew he respected geography and the social sciences, so I decided to move to Penn State. The human dimensions of global change, or the human dimensions of earth science, had some close roots in geography, and geography has always been a discipline that links people with their environment. It was really when I was at Penn State in the Earth Systems Science Center that I sort of was able to become an expert on the human dimensions of global change. The way I always define human dimensions of global change is it looks at the social causes, consequences, and responses to global environmental change.
I came to Penn State. I was actually taking over a position that Dr. Diana Liverman had just vacated to go to Arizona. I'm much more of a simulation modeler. I like to work with mathematical models that allow us to simulate how a plant actually grows, and what some of the limitations on that growth are, not least of which is climate. I also was interested in how, as atmospheric carbon dioxide levels rise in the atmosphere, that could act as a little bit of a deterrent to negative effects of the other climate changes that are happening at the same time.
I first sort of got interested in the kind of work EESI was doing, and after Bill Easterling was hired by the geography department to replace Diana Liverman, at that time I was probably the only ecologist in the college, and I was interested in trying to develop more connections with the life sciences across campus.
At the turn of the century, Penn State made a conscious decision to stand up a number of topically focused institutes. The goal was to try to stimulate cross-college and certainly interdisciplinary research in these areas. I applied for and was lucky enough to be named the first director of what became the Penn State Institutes of the Environment.
Those early days in ESSC set up a model that then got applied across the university. So ESSC was a model that was used to help develop these other institutes.
Many of the things we did in EESI influenced the way in which IEE began to develop.
When Bill came in, he started a center when Eric Barron was the director of the Earth Systems Science Center called the Advanced Carbon Research and Education Center. And at that time, he helped facilitate the hiring of Ken Davis and Klaus Keller, who came in as carbon cycle scientists in the college with some others in energy and mineral engineering.
But my group works on measuring the exchange of gases or energy between the Earth's surface and the atmosphere. So we call our research group Earth-Atmosphere Interactions.
I didn't spend much of my time doing modern global change research, but I spent a lot of time teaching things that were related to ESSC. There's a course called the Earth System, used to be called Gaia, the Earth System, and that course was really invented by Lee Kump and Rob Crane and myself, and we wrote a textbook to go with it.
We were able to put together a course that was very much an introductory course in Earth System Science.
It's interdisciplinary. It's Lee Kump from geosciences, Jim Casting, geosciences and meteorology, and Robert Crane from geography.
Here we have the description of a course that we teach for the general education, Gaia of the Earth System. And this is the course now that we've been teaching here for several years, and it's been very successful in bringing geophysiology and the concept of Gaia to the general population here at Penn State.
Charlie Hostler always made the point that you can't separate research from education.
A close, interconnected research community has been a hallmark of both ESSC and EESI. Conducting great research is fostered through relationships, connections, and community. Institute directors were intentional in their community building efforts, and it has paid off in nurturing new and exciting areas of research.
Both people and infrastructure was incredibly important. Having those people around shaped the way the research developed and provided a lot of intellectual capacity, people that you could share ideas with and bounce ideas off.
To me, EESI is a second home for faculty who might otherwise not feel entirely at home in the college.
It was a very welcoming environment here.
Dr. Barron said, I want to create community, and I want us to have a space where we can get together weekly and just talk.
If you look at the building that we were housed in, I put a living room in there, in the middle. I put all the people around the edges, and I designed that space and put a living room in the middle so people could gather.
Every Wednesday morning, he had a short breakfast hour, an hour, coffee and bagels. We all got together. We just talked, and so everyone knew what everyone was doing, and that helped in sense of community building.
Like I always wanted EESI to feel a little bit like a nest, so that you feel comfortable talking about ideas that might be wrong or might not make all that much sense.
The idea was that we were a family, a community.
EESI is its people, so it's not been to me so much that, EESI has this resource or that resource and I really need that thing. It's been more the community that grows around that idea.
Under the direction of Sue Brantley, EESI broadened research into Earth systems ecology, critical zone science, planetary science, and the impacts of energy systems on society. As global environmental change has grown as a societal concern, the research at the Institute strives to develop an Earth system science that informs solutions.
I came to Penn State in 1986. I came as a geochemist in the Department of Geosciences, but slowly I became more and more affiliated with the Earth Systems Science Center. And then when Eric Barron was essentially promoted to become the Dean of the College of Earth and Mineral Sciences, he ran a search for the new director, and that's when he hired me to become the director.
Sue, from the beginning, was a very strong scientist. That was clear. It seemed like she was really a good choice to me.
When I became director of what became EESI, our budget was in the reds. My main philosophy was to always be doing the best science, always be enabling our scientists to do the best research they could possibly do. And what I've always observed at Penn State is if you put really good science out on the table, then money comes to you. So by the same time that we were cutting in some ways, we were really trying to facilitate our great people to put great science out on the table.
And when Eric left and EESI started with Sue Brantley, then there was a big and sudden change in the focus and the activities reflecting Sue Brantley's interests.
With Dr. Brantley, when she assumed leadership of the Institute, I think that is at the point in time in which we really began to broaden the horizons in terms of what could EESI do in the context of Earth system and environmental system research at Penn State.
I wanted the Institute to be a lot like a wildcatter in that we were willing to take risk, willing to try things and fail, and find the exciting places of growth. In oil and gas development, there are small companies and there are big companies. And the big companies are very, very concerned about any kind of press they get and any kind of bad publicity, so they're very risk averse. And then the wildcatters, the small companies, They need the money. They're not as risk averse. One of the pushes that I made was to grow what we called Earth Systems Ecology.
As someone who was studying ecosystem carbon cycle, I needed colleagues in ecosystem sciences. I was searching for connections. Sue said, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Let's try to get some people who will work and strengthen the ecosystem side of our endeavor.
And so we were very successful in bringing in ecologists to come into our college and work with what were mainly physical scientists, because the Earth system obviously is very much affected by the biota, by all the organisms on the planet. So we made some of our best hires in that area. We hired Erica Smithwick and then Sarah Ivory in geosciences. And they are all what I would call ecologists or ecological scientists, but they're very interested in global systems and how organisms interact with the physical parts of the planet. So they fit in wonderfully into this college.
I've been associated with EESI for 5 years, for the whole time that I've been at Penn State. And my research focuses on using fossils of plants in particular to study ancient ecosystems and how they change over time. I really enjoyed working with EESI from the moment that I started at Penn State. I thought it was such a great community of very diverse interdisciplinary people. I came to EESI in 2007. I was hired as part of an effort to expand work in global ecology. And my work at that time was focused on the influence of wildfire on landscape dynamics. So I came into the Department of Geography, and ever since I've been a faculty associate here in the EESI family.
I've always been really big on looking at the whole picture. And one of the areas that I really pushed as a scientist is what I call critical zone science. And it's similar to Earth systems ecology, but it's looking at the surface of our planet from groundwater all the way to the top of the canopy of trees and seeing that layer as one entity.
So I think there is a definite synergy, and has been for a long time, between understanding the Earth and understanding other planets. We live in the golden age of planetary exploration. There's 3 different missions getting ready to go to Venus. There is a mission, several missions that operating or going to the outer solar system. So we live at a time when it's not just one location of the solar system. There's exploration all over the solar system, essentially almost every planet. Go look in the future, understanding Venus and understanding the other planets, letting them be a comparison, to the Earth, is a really important thing that we can do. And I think EESI is a great place to do that.
What I try to do is what I term a political industrial ecology analysis. So I look at the whole supply chain of an energy system. So it's not just, when we flick the light switch and turn on the lights, we have to think through how are the resources extracted that go into a power plant to generate electricity that comes into our buildings. So I try to take that type of supply chain approach and then go along that supply chain to understand what happens to those human environment relationships.
I came to Penn State in 2007, and I quickly realized that Penn State had a problem. That there were lots of kind of energy environment economists on campus, right? And a lot of them were interested in doing interdisciplinary stuff, but they were really kind of scattered all over campus. I approached Sue Brantley and asked if EESI would help solve this problem by basically helping me to set up the Energy and Environmental Economics and Policy Initiative.
And that, has bloomed into a much bigger effort on his part that's been very, very successful.
Through my connections with EESI, and particularly working with Professor Sue Brantley, I've been able to do interdisciplinary research with geoscientists.
One of the things that Sue Brantley did very well is look not just what EESI has been or what EESI is, but Sue had a great knack for always looking for what EESI could be.
Well, to do interdisciplinary science, it is really difficult because every discipline has its own language. It's hard to talk across those languages. And I think that humility is often lacking in scientists. If you think you know a lot and you meet someone from a different discipline who speaks a different language and doesn't understand what you're talking about, you're going to think possibly that they're not as smart as you. But if you're a humble person and you meet someone that speaks a different language and doesn't understand what you work on, but you're humble enough to listen to them, maybe you'll actually learn something.
When I first came to EESI, it was just an inspiring place to be with so many other faculty members studying the Earth. In particular, though, I was really interested in how they were approaching these disciplines by studying the Earth and the systems approach, which is in our title, to understand how the geology, the geography, the meteorology, the physical and the biological sciences all were intertwined to understand Earth's history and also Earth's future. I think what's shifted over time is that while we still understand and want to be asking questions about the Earth, now we're starting to understand, well, why does that matter? Why do we want to understand this for society? And as the Earth is rapidly changing, we want to understand how now to use that to find solutions in the real world and how we can better help society move through those transitions.
The focus on the carbon cycle and also the management of the carbon cycle for mitigating the problem we have with fossil fuels, that requires a focus on energy and also having people change their behavior or how to assess risk for climate change. And so we began to bring in people who could address the energy issues and the risk issues much more directly.
We converged on the idea that this was a piece of Earth system science that we could strengthen within EMS. A lot of our work in the last 15 years now, 10 to 15 years, has been studying human emissions.
The world now is human dominated. The mass of all the whales and all the elephants and all the wildlife on Earth is dwarfed by the mass of humans and our farm animals and our pets. The world is us now. And so the challenges to keep us happy and healthy while keeping the ecosystems going, keeping the world going, have just never been bigger. What is going on in the Institute has never been more important.
The focus on systems, Earth Systems Science Center, Earth Environmental Systems Institute, this awareness of the interconnections, teleconnections, codependency of life and environment. It's also important to taking proper steps toward addressing the problems society faces today.
I think we all recognize the importance of the kinds of topics and the science that EESI does in the area of climate change, energy transitions, environmental health. These are areas that increasingly require integration, and I think EESI is really well poised to conduct that research excellently.
I feel like I was really lucky to be leading EESI when I led.
I just feel incredibly lucky that I was given an opportunity to work to attract talent to a place that had vision.
Well, we've been blessed with amazing leadership by Barron, by Sue Brantley, most recently our interim director, Alan Taylor. And so this is a big footprint that I'm stepping into, but I also feel very supported by all of our faculty and staff and by the college and the university.
I can't take credit for whatever happened to build a successful enterprise, but I will take credit for finding the money and restructuring the college to the point where we could grow an Earth System Science Center.
Well, I think it was a lot of fun.